My husband always had this way of making me feel invisible, polite enough in public, attentive to guests, but when it was just us, it was like I vanished. We'd been married 8 years, and somewhere between routine and responsibility, affection had thinned into duty. He loved order, schedules, achievements. I loved to feel. But feelings had become inconvenient in our house. When he told me 2 of his old friends from back home were flying in for a few days, I didn't mind. I liked the idea of people filling the quiet. I cleaned, cooked, set up the guest room like I was preparing for royalty. He barely looked up from his emails to notice. But when his friends arrived, laughing, embracing him like a brother, it was like someone injected life into the house. Michael was the first to catch my eye. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice that melted the room like warm butter. He didn't just speak, he saw. The other friend, Peter, was loud and funny, always joking, but Michael, he was still. He watched. He listened. And when he looked at me, it wasn't casual. Dinner that night was a full spread. I poured my effort into every dish, something my husband usually waved off as unnecessary. But Michael took a bite and said, "You must have cooked this with love." I felt a blush crawl up my neck. My husband grunted something about her always overdoing things. They all laughed. Michael didn't. Later, while they debated football, I cleared the table. Michael appeared beside me, offering to help. I said no, but he stayed anyway, drying dishes with slow, deliberate movements. He asked if I always cooked like this. I told him I used to love it, before it started feeling like performance art for someone who never applauded. He smiled, not pity, just understanding. We didn't say much more. He returned to the living room. I stayed in the kitchen, breathing like I had run a mile. That night, as I lay beside my husband scrolling through his phone, I thought about how Michael said my name. Soft, deliberate. Not rushed, not like checking something off a list. Just aware. I couldn't remember the last time my husband had said my name without it being to ask where something was or remind me about an appointment. I wasn't looking for anything. Not consciously. I had just gotten used to this quiet ache, a life built on politeness and predictable silences. But suddenly, something in the air had shifted. Not loud. Not obvious. Just enough to remind me what it felt like to be noticed. And once you remember that feeling, it's hard to unfeel it. As my husband turned off the lamp without a word, I stared into the dark and replayed Michael's voice in my head. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew that night had opened a door I hadn't realized was even closed. The next day moved slowly, like the house itself was holding its breath. The usual rhythm between me and my husband, short exchanges, practical words, no tenderness, continued. He laughed with his friends over coffee, talking about old times, shared jokes, and stories I wasn't part of. I smiled, nodded, filled mugs, and cleared plates. That was my role, and I played it well. But every so often, I'd catch Michael watching me, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but like he noticed things others didn't. In the afternoon, my husband and Peter went out to run errands. Michael stayed behind, said he was tired, needed to rest. I pretended not to care. I folded laundry, tidied the kitchen again. When I walked past the living room, he called my name, asked if I had a moment. I hesitated, then sat across from him. We didn't speak for a minute. It wasn't awkward. He just looked at me, then said softly, "You always this quiet or just around him?" I laughed, caught off guard, but it faded fast. "I used to be loud," I said. "I used to sing in the mornings." He smiled and asked what changed. I didn't answer. He told me I had an energy about me that didn't match the silence I wore. That it was strange, beautiful even, but heavy. I swallowed hard. No one had said anything like that to me in years. Maybe ever. The way he looked at me made my skin warm. It wasn't about beauty or attraction. Not entirely. It was the way he saw through the practiced smile and into the part of me I kept tucked away. He asked what I used to love doing. I told him I painted, before the spare room became a storage space. Before time started belonging to everyone but me. He asked if I missed it. I said I missed myself. We didn't move closer, didn't touch. But the space between us felt charged, full of things unspoken. I made an excuse and went to the kitchen, gripping the counter as if it could steady the rush inside me. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Just one line. "Thank you for the conversation. You deserve more of them." I stared at it longer than I should have. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. That night, I stood in the hallway while the house quieted. My husband was already in bed, TV flickering in the background. I didn't want to go in yet. I leaned against the wall and let myself feel the pull I'd been ignoring. Not just toward Michael, but toward something deeper. The version of me that still wanted to be heard, touched, chosen. I told myself it was harmless. A moment. A thought. But it wasn't. It was a door opening wider. And once I crossed that threshold in my heart, everything else started to feel like an echo of something long gone. The next morning was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the calm before something inevitable. My husband and Peter decided to drive into the city for the afternoon. Michael stayed back again. No excuses this time. Just said he wasn't up for the crowds. I pretended not to notice, but I felt every second stretch thin as the house emptied. We didn't plan anything. We didn't speak much. I made tea. He stood by the window, watching the sky shift. There was tension, thick but unspoken. I sat down across from him. For the first time, I didn't avoid his eyes. "I'm sorry if I've crossed a line," he said. His voice was steady, but softer than before. "I've just never seen someone try so hard to disappear." That sentence undid something in me. I didn't respond at first. I felt exposed in a way that wasn't embarrassing, just real. "It's easier than fighting to be seen," I said finally. He walked over slowly. Not invasive. Not dramatic. He just stood there, close enough that I could hear his breathing. "You don't deserve that," he said, and it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like truth. I looked at his hand. It didn't move toward me. It just stayed at his side. And I was the one who reached for it. The moment our fingers touched, it was like the silence shattered. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't calculating. I wasn't afraid. I was just feeling. I hadn't felt in so long. When he kissed me, it wasn't urgent. It was careful, as if he knew I might break. But I didn't. I leaned in, met him halfway. My heart pounded, but my mind was strangely still. I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. It was slow, quiet, deliberate. Not rushed or reckless. It was the kind of closeness that feels less like sin and more like survival. I felt my body remember things I had pushed down for years, the need to be touched, held, wanted. Afterward, the weight of it sank in. I sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled to my chest. I couldn't speak. My hands trembled. Michael reached out, barely touching my back. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but I didn't know if I was. "I don't know what I just did," I whispered. "You did what you needed," he replied. And it wasn't permission. It wasn't justification. It was just an observation. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to go back into the life I'd walked out of for those few minutes. But I knew I would. That was the cruelest part. I wasn't planning to leave. I wasn't ready to destroy anything. I just needed to feel like a person again. In that moment, I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel ashamed either. I felt real. And being real, after pretending for so long, felt like both the heaviest and most beautiful thing I'd done in years. The next morning, the house felt heavier, not with noise but with knowing. Michael barely looked at me. He kept conversation light, polite. My husband laughed over breakfast, joked about traffic, completely unaware that everything beneath the surface had shifted. I responded when spoken to, smiled when necessary, and kept my hands busy to avoid looking like I was unraveling inside. They packed to leave that afternoon. Peter made loud goodbyes, already planning the next visit. Michael waited until the very end. His hug was brief, impersonal. No words. But as he pulled back, he looked into my eyes and quietly said, "Take care of yourself." It landed like a final sentence on a chapter one hadn't meant to write. After they left, I stood in the kitchen longer than I needed to, holding the same cup in my hand, rinsing it over and over. My husband came up behind me, kissed my cheek, and asked what was for dinner. Like nothing had happened. Like the house hadn't witnessed me become someone I didn't recognize. That night, I tried to reach for him in bed. Not out of guilt, just a quiet hope that maybe something could return. He turned over, mumbled something about being tired. I lay there staring at the ceiling, his back inches away, but emotionally unreachable. I wasn't angry, just finished. The days that followed felt strange. I wasn't broken. I functioned. I folded clothes, returned emails, cooked meals. But inside, something was different. Not destroyed, not chaotic. Just awake. I began writing again in a notebook I hadn't touched in years. I found old paintbrushes in a box I'd nearly thrown out months ago. None of this was for anyone. Just me. I never told Michael goodbye properly. I never told my husband anything. I didn't have the courage, or maybe I didn't believe it would change anything. What could I say? That I made a mistake? That I needed something I didn't even realize I'd been starving for? I started observing my husband more closely. Not to judge him, but to understand.
He hadn't changed.
He was the same man I married. I just stopped fitting into the version of love he had to offer. Maybe I had outgrown the silence. Maybe I had begun mourning a life I was still living. The moment with Michael didn't follow me like a scandal. It followed me like a mirror. It didn't make me feel reckless. It made me feel real.
Seen.
It reminded me that I was still a woman, not just someone's wife, not just someone holding everything together in a quiet, clean house. I don't know what comes next. I haven't made any decisions. I still wear the ring. I still cook dinner. But something is shifting inside me every day. Not because of an affair, but because I finally remembered who I was before I became invisible. And once you see yourself again, you can't unsee it.